Yes, good evening to the listeners who are joining us live this evening for this edition of Indaba. We are on live on Facebook and on YouTube. I'm not sure if we are on 91.1 this evening, but we are definitely live on Facebook and YouTube. We apologize for the late start. We have had a little bit of some technical issues to deal with, so we apologize for that. But here we are, we're live and ready to go. This is Indaba where knowledge grows, and we are full team this evening. Full team this evening, and of course,
Yes,
the
indeed.
program is a very simple one this evening. We have the usual Africa report, in which we're looking at a very topical issue. I call it textile imperialism because of the period we are in now. You know, we have just had our Africa, the fashion show. We are moving into the African village, the Liz Yasu Umawali village, where you will have an exposition of African fashions and whatnot. So this is in keeping with our spirit, actually. Keeping with that spirit, a little bit longer than usual, but I think I wouldn't bore you with it. Like, I think it's quite interesting. I myself learned something from preparing the content for this edition this evening. And after that, we are going to have a clip from last week's Kwame Memorial Lecture Series panel discussion. We're going to have one item which we are going to play for you, and that would be followed by a discussion. That selection was by Robin Walker, who is the author of a very significant work, When We Ruled. Very important work. So we are going to listen to that, and then we are going to break out into some discussions after that. So let me just let my brothers here bring their own greetings to the audience. Good evening, my brothers.
Good evening, doctor. Good evening. How are you?
Exhausted as usual.
The last program you were on there, that panel discussion with Dr. Walker, it seemed to me that there was a level of intensity there.
King, what is that? What is that
There
term?
was a certain level of intensity. There seemed to be some issues
Oh,
within the reparations, field
well,
that
yeah, yeah,
there was
yeah. You
some
see,
disagreement on.
Shabaka, you'll understand. We grew up from grassroots. We grew up from, you know, situations where we knew want as such, you know. And I believe very strongly that the reparations movement is grounded in a kind of middle class bourgeois mentality. That, you know, I genuinely believe so, because if you listen to the discourse on Sunday, we're talking about government level, government structure, government this, government that, and not individual. It's specifically mentioned, not individual. I have a problem with that. I really do. But that's something we can discuss at another time, right?
Yeah,
But I
I think.
really do have a problem.
Yeah, I think Dr. Fergus, I think as a real student of history, as a professor, but also as a student yourself, you would be aware that there are periods in time when you have similar kinds of situations, and the class that prosecutes the issue tends to develop develop the issue around their own interests. That's something that we see a lot of in history. I can't think of one right off the top of my head. I'm sure you could, but
Well, the
that I know
decolonization movement
that.
was one of them. Huh? The decolonization movement was one of them. It was basically a reformist movement, not a revolutionary movement. Because this
Correct. There we
class
go.
of anti-colonial activists wanted into the system, not to destroy the system. They wanted in, they wanted to participate. And you know, so that kind of professional intellectual middle class was what guided
Yeah.
the reformist movement that they call
Yeah.
anti-colonialism. It really
So
wasn't anti-colonialism, it was anti-exclusion. This is what it was.
yes, yes, yes,
They
and I think
wanted
that
in.
and that information is well documented in our report to the government. But as I say, that's one of the lessons of history. So it's important that those who understand those lessons speak up at this time. So yes, indeed, brother Kamau, how art thou?
I'm doing fine. The grand finale, as it were, for a season. It's been a TIME time, hasn't it? We've touched on all kinds of sensitive topics. I hope that we haven't mashed too many corns in the process. But it has been some very, very good dialogue. Rastafari would say live along because you don't want to speak dying into the atmosphere. But for what it's worth, it's really good to end on a high note with all three of us here, on the program on tonight, and with such topical themes.
Yeah, let me
Speaking, of course, to textile imperialism, and that of course, the
reparation.
reparations,
Let me
by
just
way of such heavy hitters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
power.
want to use the opportunity before we start to just say that the civil society in Trinidad and Tobago has arranged today, or were arranging, some solidarity action with Cuba. So somewhere near the end of the program, I'll give an update on that. I mean, Cuba apparently,
Please.
well, we know this. The Cubans are suffering a great deal because, the blockade. But there's something more that being including on that list of countries that are material sponsors of terrorism has really upped the ante with the blockade and made it very, very difficult for the country to trade. And the suffering of the Cuban people is growing in intensity. And so today there was some solidarity actions, and tomorrow I understand that brothers and sisters will hit the streets to make their voices heard. So I'm just giving everybody a quick heads up on that, something to pay attention to.
Oh, absolutely. Very interesting developments.
Yes, so Renee, if you're standing by, bring up the report and let's get going. Yes, Renee?
The capital of Ogun State in southwest Nigeria, situated on the east bank of the Ogun River.
It is that time of year again. Trinbago's Pan-African Festival, climaxing in the Lidj Yasu Umuwale village, which features the largest market in the Caribbean for African cultural products, including lots of African fabrics, authentic and otherwise. This week's Africa Report is an educational and public service edition where we showcase traditional technologies and the methods of producing renowned Nigerian fabrics, such as the Ashoke, Ankara, Batik, and Adire. Like every other aspect of African culture, the textile and fashion industries are being appropriated by foreigners, bastardized, and reintroduced into Africa. Go back as far as you can. African religion suffered the same fate centuries ago. African music, African medical sciences, African steelmaking, African dances. I can go on and on. The Africa Report will showcase the challenge to local producers by imported Chinese imitation of these traditional fabrics, especially the Adire. One could even hear in Nigeria the expression Chinese Adire. Let me acknowledge, however, that China is not the only foreign threat to traditional African textiles and fabrics. Pakistan is into the game as well. Among the Europeans, Belgium dominates the supply of certain fabrics, and the United States of America is in a class by itself with junk clothing. The greater fear of the Chinese ruining production centers and the entire value chain of production that have been in the same family for over 500 years is their unique ability to undercut prices. Of course, they undercut quality as well, but this is often discovered after purchasing the items. The Lidj Yasu Umuwale village market might also offer Igbo fabrics such as the Akwete, which is also under assault by Chinese imitators. There is no year that the Ghanaians do not showcase their unique fabrics and styles at the village, particularly the Kente fabric and schmuck outfit. Whoever the vendor is, let the buyer beware. It is possible that the only thing African about the elegant fabric or garment that you're looking at is the vendor. This edition of the Africa Report relies on the vlog Doing Business in Nigeria and the Channels Television Report. Both focus on the Adire markets of Abeokuta, the capital city of Ogun State in Yorubaland, southwestern Nigeria. This week's Africa Report will follow a different format from previous. I will let the vendors and the two commentators take us from traditions in the industry to Chinese imitation and a possible way out. You will hear dress styles such as Agbada, Bubu, among others. Take notes. The traditional ironing method does not use iron, but a heavy wooden sledge, which perhaps speaks to the antiquity of this method of fabric making. Most people interpret cultural tradition as timeless. However, change is the only constant in the universe, and even local designers and producers have adapted new styles and techniques, which nevertheless are African inventions. You will hear some of these adaptations.
My name is Chief Mrs. Oluwakemi Shomuiwa Odolami. I am the Otun Iyaloja of Adire Kampala Market here. It was not modern like this.
Yes.
We use candle, we make it people. Yes. Yeah. But now it has improved. We have a stamping one, but the stamping one we are doing now, we are not doing it like before that we use stamp blank to do it, but we use foam to make some designs, and we have freehand design in which we make the design as if we are writing notes, we are writing book. That's how we made the design.
Everybody like Adire, not only Yorubas, even Igbo, throughout the Nigeria, throughout the world, everybody like it.
Adire is a locally made tie and dye textile made with a variety of tie and dye techniques. It is a material designed with wax-resist methods, which produces pattern designs in dazzling arrays of tints and hues. The designs are achieved through a thorough and traditional process. It is custom-made, a hand-printed work. This makes the fabric unique. The clothes are dipped into the dye and then pulled out to allow it to oxidize and take on the bright blue color. Designs are created by simple techniques of folding, crumpling, and sparsely splashing the hot wax onto a cloth before dyeing. It takes roughly 3 days to complete a yard and about 2 weeks to complete 5 yards. The fabric is spread outside, left to dry for a while under the sun before it's immersed into dye solution. The planking process is done after dyed materials are dried. Heating the material with a piece of heavy wood on a platform makes it appear like well-ironed fabrics.
When it is raining, they cannot dry outside. And you know how long it will take for a cloth to dry when you are drying inside. So one of the technology that has been introduced is the dryer. But they would have done their time. They would have, they would have died. The dryer will only assist them to dry on time. And it will equally increase the output of what they are pushing out.
Just Buba and Shokoto, I have it. Bubu, with work on it, I have it on Adire. No style you can make with Adire. You can make shirt with Adire. You can make even suit with Adire.
Adire, as many knew it, is now challenged by an inferior machine print.
It's called adire, tie and dye. Adi, are. One of the process is that after you tie and dye, you dry. But a situation whereby some people will now go to China and begin to print and call it adire. No, that is not adire. That is not our adire. And we know what China stands for when it comes to clothing fabrics. Some people claim it is cheaper. Yes, it might be cheaper, but it is not quality. So we've had that challenge and we're putting things in place to tackle it. Because the saddening thing is that some are even now selling it right inside the Itoku market, which everybody knows as the Ojadire. Very soon we'll be going out there to flush them out. If you want to do such, not inside our heritage. We're not just substandard. It's not even our own. It is not even tie and dye. Because it was not tied. It was not dyed. It was only passed through a machine. It was printed. And that is not adire. The value of adire is the fact that it is adi, are. If they want to do the normal printing, they should do it. But not taking our designs to go and print something, then bringing it back to deceive our people that it is tie and dye.
All these ones are Chinese.
These are Chinese.
So you can see the Chinese came here and picked the designs, and now they are producing our own local materials, our own local designs, and then bringing it back to us to sell. This is extremely very worrisome because now you are buying from the Chinese. It's like you are buying imported products and you're selling full imported products, and the entire value chain is missing.
We are not producing the material, and most of the material we are using is from China. The guinea that we are using, even the common wax that we are using is an imported. The dye is an imported, and it's very expensive now. Candle is in England.
I mean candles and everything, and this really plays down on the originality of some of these designs, because these are local designs that has been in existence for more than 500 years within the culture of the Southwest race. And this
even more than 500 years.
Yeah, more than 500 years, and now we're seeing the Chinese taking over that entire value chain. All of this is brought in by the Chinese, and then finished product, and it looks exactly like what we used to produce here. I mean, and I'm sure that they'll be achieving this faster.
But the only difference is that the fabric can never be the same.
Yeah.
You can see this one. This is like synthetic something. It's
it's
not
like,
cotton and it's not beanie
like
material.
rubber.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's not beanie and it's not cotton.
Yeah.
So the only difference is in the fabric. But talk of the design, they came here, steal our design. How do they steal the design? They will just come as buyers. They will buy most of these stuff. Like you come now, you buy any design here.
Yeah.
They will now take it down to their country and produce.
Yeah.
Look at ordinary batik. All these batik before, how much are we selling it before? But now it's 10,000. We have the allocated for 30,000. The clothes that before it was just like 2,500. We have all those freehand design, 15,000.
This one now.
This one is 4,000.
Because it's faster.
No, it's not pure cotton.
Okay.
It's not pure cotton. They just imitate our adire. If you want to buy cotton of this now, you buy like 12,000. Look at this, all this computer gown. How much are we selling it? This is a local made. Now it's 10,000. Look at it. See, you know it's a pure cotton.
Yeah, it's pure cotton.
There are some people that buy that out of ignorance. Someone came to my office some times ago, and the person was wearing China adire. And I know on a good day, that man is so culturally inclined that he will not buy China adire. And I took him up like, how can it be you? And he said, no, I bought it from Itoku. In fact, I bought about 5. Yes, at times it might be a bit difficult to identify, but if you look clearly, you can identify. Some of it, the way it will be shining, you will know, no, this is not our idea. Then, when you look at this, and you look at this, most of the time it will be difficult for you to see which one is, let me say this in Yoruba, Ewo loju, Ewo lodi. That is the real idea. But when it comes to China, it is so easy for you to know that oju eni, odi eni, because most of the time it's either there's nothing there or a faded pattern there. We cannot do this alone. We will work with the Yalojas, the market men and women who equally believes in the values of what has been bequeathed to our hands. So we have to work with all of them, the KBACs and all that. We will go to them. We are starting that campaign very soon.
Yes, so that was very interesting. Even as I am the author of it, I am still excited just by listening to it. So let me hear your comments, brothers. Let me hear if you learned anything at all from this, and if you are scared of what you're wearing. I came with my schmuck to make sure tonight. I came with my schmuck to the Chinese.
Oh goodness, yeah. I think I'm sure in my case. I think I'm sure in my case, given the source of the particular garment that I'm wearing on tonight. But again, very very valid points. One, the time. The
Shabaka,
energy,
you're looking suspect,
the work that goes into the original. Yeah.
You guys have the real Adi Ray. What can I say?
Adi Ray is tie-dye, my brother. Don't
No,
try
but it was
that.
beautiful. I really see the way that they did it, and because it really is extraordinary to see what the Africans bring from Ghana, Nigeria to Trinidad every year. It's astounding to see what they're doing with fabric. And so to see the processes, see how it was made, and so on was quite extraordinary for me. I really enjoyed the piece.
Absolutely,
Yes,
I couldn't agree more.
Sorry,
I couldn't agree more. I was just about to say 3 things really quickly.
Yes,
One,
yes.
I have to agree with my brother in terms of the creativity. But then, as someone that buys them as often and as much as I do, I tend to be, a bargain buyer myself. I'm going to have to throw away the bargain piece, because when you see the effort that goes into it, when they call the price that they call for, with regards to it, you just going to have to say, thank you so very much, and thank you for your service, and yes, it's worth every penny. So to lead with that, and then of course with regards to the process, China doesn't need to do that, does it? It is the world's largest supplier of steel. It corners so many markets. It is a sweatshop of the world. If you want to do anything cheap, you go to China, you get it done. They have cornered a certain market in terms of cheap goods and cheap labor, certainly even in the tech environment. But it speaks to the level of competitiveness within and among the Asians, that they are willing to come in to Africa and to see what is being done there, what is being produced there, and to like they have done. It's not exclusive to Africa, like they have done in India, like they have done in the US, like they have done in Europe. They take something, they take a sample, they take it home, they reverse engineer, they create a cheaper version, and they come to the market. So I want to land on the fact that we have a responsibility to make a choice. And that choice is, do I want to go authentic and support the hardworking man, the hardworking woman, the 3 days, the 5 days it takes to bring that cloth to a place of completion, and then you have to take it into the garment manufacturing process? Or do you want to to buy it cheaply, and perhaps get more, but the original designer, the original thought leader behind it, the original IP is not being honored. So that's for the consumer to make a choice, and certainly I know what my choice is going to be all the time, every time, but it's not always easy to spot, is it?
No, well, as you heard the expert at the end, it's difficult for some people, especially when the garment is a little bit thicker and when they mix a little bit more cotton with it, because generally they may have 35% cotton, 25% cotton. But if they have 65% cotton, it becomes a little bit more tricky, because the African garments generally, that type of garment is 100% cotton. And so if you can detect what's under or inside, because the material so soaks into the thing, you don't know if it is inside or outside. You hear the term, the material is the dye is part of the material. It's not on the material. It becomes part of the material itself. So you need to be able now to detect this thing is cotton. You are feeling all this dye and so on, but this thing is still cotton. It's very challenging. It's very difficult.
Yeah, that's one thing.
Capitalizing on it, that it's difficult even if you want to check on it. It's difficult.
Yeah, well, what I was hoping, Doctor, is the one thing missing from the report was a clear explanation of how to make a distinction. But that's something I guess we can talk about later, because I know now we have to turn our attention to reparations.
No, well, the lady in the end, she said, when she spoke Yoruba, what she was saying was inside out. What you see on the outside, what we call wrong side, the wrong side is the same thing as the outside. The Chinese have not been able to accomplish that. That's one way to detect it. But of course, at one time it was in washing, but then you have bought it already, because African dyes do not wash out. So that is one way. After you buy it, if you wash and you see it's looking a little faded, you know you have been caught. You have been caught. But those are two ways that I can tell you after you buy it. But before you buy it, check inside, outside. That is one way to do it. Check inside, outside, and see if it looks almost exactly the same. In other words, if you make a mistake and make your garment for the underside of the outside, nobody would detect it. That is the authentic African.
Indeed. Well, that's a good note to end now. We know what to look for when we're looking for the real Adire.
Absolutely.
So let's call for, we now are going to watch or listen to and watch a presentation on reparations. Dr. Fergus was part of the panel. We're going to just hear one segment of that panel now. Dr. Fergus, it's Dr. What's his name?
Robin Walker.
Robin Walker, indeed.
Robin
so we're going to listen to Dr. Robin Walker, and when we come back, we'll be
Black
talking
Secret.
about...
He's head of the Black Secret, an organization called the Black Secret.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, Renee?
To the issue reparations, I take a slightly different perspective to a lot of people, and I'm going to explain that difference. Most of us, when we talk about reparations, we talk about numbers of victims multiplied by the unpaid wages over hundreds and hundreds of years. We talk about the false imprisonment of our enslaved African ancestors, and how much, if you put somebody through false imprisonment, what would be the compensation, and multiply that by the number of victims. We talk about the unjust enrichment. How much did this unjust enrichment add to the economies of Britain, the economies of France, the economies of Spain, Portugal, etc., etc., etc.? And when you add all that up at compound interest, it opened up a wealth gap between them and us of many, many, many trillions. That's the standard way that most people look at reparations. And it's a valid way, but I'm going to put a slightly different spin on the issue. You see, we have to recognize that those Africans that were captured and enslaved brought skills, brought wealth, brought intellectual capacity to the Western world. And no one really talks about this. There's a very important book here, and it's called Pre-Colonial African Material Culture. And it was written by an African-American professor, Professor Vincent Taraku Farrar. And he talks about the transfer of technology from Africa to the Western world during mass enslavement, including the technologies of metallurgy, the technologies of being a mechanic, the technologies of being a miner, the technologies of carpentry, boat building, cotton technologies, as well as farmers. You see, a lot of people were under the impression that our contribution to the Western Hemisphere was strictly as farmers. No, it's all these other areas as well. And therefore, when it comes to the intellectual development, we are contributors to that. And that has never been recognized, and that has never been factored into what needs to be said when we are dealing with reparations. So, for example, a controversial paper came out a couple of years ago by an English scholar, Dr. Jenny Bulstrode, and she talked about the role that 76 enslaved metallurgists in Jamaica contributed to something that has gone down in history as the CORT process, C-O-R-T process. And that's about reusing scrap metal and turning scrap metal into high-grade metal. And this was one of the important things in the evolution of the Industrial Revolution. And those 76 enslaved metallurgists in Jamaica deserve to get shine in history, but instead those contributions have been attributed to Henry Court, when indeed it should have been to the 76 enslaved Jamaicans. And that's important because what it shows is the example of intellectual transfer from Africa to the Americas. And that needs to be a part of the discussion. How much money did the Henry Court process generate for the British economy? And again, that's a very important area. We all know about the legendary Mary Seacole, and she, in Jamaica, using West African medical ideas and technologies, she was able to claim she never lost a mother or a child when it came to childbirth. The use of superfoods. She is one of the pioneers of superfoods, also in the suppression of a cholera epidemic. And those skills, those intellectual developments are coming from African intellectual traditions that, again, most people don't speak of. There's the very famous example of Wanzimus, the enslaved African in Boston, in the United States, whose technologies, again, coming straight from Africa, involving the technique that precedes vaccination. It's called the inoculation techniques, in how you suppress the spread of smallpox. So the smallpox vaccine, and that is essentially how vaccination spread in the Western world. It starts from an enslaved African bringing those ideas, bringing that technology from Africa. And again, this is something that is hardly ever recognized. Again, another African-American example is we think of Jack Daniel's whiskey and not realize that the master distiller who came up with the formula was another enslaved African. His name was Nathan Nearest Green. And consequently, why are we even calling this thing Jack Daniels? So when it comes to then the intellectual that enslaved people brought, many of us grew up on folk tales that are of African origin, such as Anansi and so on. And another body of those folk tales are the Brer Rabbit stories. And the Brer Rabbit stories were first, if you like, published and made into something by Joel Chandler Harris. And he was a European American who profited from that. And he called them the Uncle Remus stories. And those same stories were plagiarized again by somebody in England called Beatrice Potter, who turned Brer Rabbit into Peter Rabbit and made millions. The Peter Rabbit stories are still on sale today, having gone through umpteenth reprints and reprints and reprints. Did enslaved Africans, who are the people who created those stories, did they receive anything? In fact, is there even an acknowledgement that the Brer Rabbit, Peter Rabbit, and for that matter, Bugs Bunny stories originated as African folk tales? And how much did we lose by them not being recognized as such? When it comes to what enslaved Africans brought to the Western world, even when it comes to areas of intangible heritage, one of my areas of research is in music, another area is in dance, where on plantations in America, there were the 4 plantation dances that the African Americans did: the turkey trot, the bunny hug, the grizzly bear, and the camel walk. And then when this was ripped off, it then became the foxtrot, which is one of the ballroom dances we have today. Black people in Buenos Aires are the ones that took the tango from Central Africa. It's a Central African word, by the way. And then by the time we get to Black people being brought to Buenos Aires as enslaved people, that becomes the dance, the tango. Black Cubans are the people that were responsible for the rumba. The cha-cha-cha is also a Black Cuban dance. The African Americans produced the jive. And so a lot of the ballroom dances that we have today, in fact, 2/3 of them are actually of Black origins. Does anyone talk about this? Does anyone talk about, well, you know, perhaps Black people should get some shine because it's their dances that are being put out there? So the main point that I want to make is when we are factoring in mass enslavement, don't just think of it as numbers of plantation people multiplied by unpaid wages, numbers of enslaved people multiplied by false imprisonment, numbers of enslaved people multiplied by the unjust enrichment and then compounded equaling trillions. We also have to factor in the fact that African intellectual contributions that have also generated millions, and we should also compound for those millions too. And at some point that needs to be a part of the discussion. And that's me. Thank you very much.
Yes. So that's his presentation. It wasn't very long. Interesting. Of course, the document that the CARICOM Reparations Committee is basing its claims on now is called the Brattle Group Report. It does not have those items. We must admit that. They do have a vague term they call non-quantifiable harms, whatever those are. But I suspect that it may include those skills and expertise that Robin Walker would have been talking about. But the problem is they did not even mention them. Okay. So I was there on Sunday. We critiqued, each other's presentation and so on. So let me hear the brothers here what they have to say about Robin Walker and his contribution. I've done some research into African musical traditions as well. You have, for example, the balafon, which is a percussion instrument that came with enslaved the Africans. You have a stringed instruments from the Gambia, from the Congo. the kora. All these were instruments already existing at the time before the beginning of the slave trade. And we have done some work. I think sometimes when you're based in England, you tend to think that nothing is going on in the Caribbean. That's one of the problems we have. But Dr. Rita Pemberton has done a PhD on medical practices, and she groomed a student who also went full fledged into that area. So it's not that we have not done anything, but he is correct. It has not fed into the reparations discourse, right? We have midwives, for example. You have the stereotype of Africans as wet nurses, but they don't talk about midwifery. You see, where the real medical skills come in, and they weren't midwives only for themselves. They were midwives of white women, and they were sometimes the doctors and the nurses combined in the hospitals. There's a doctor, a white doctor, George Pinkett, who was a naval doctor in the Caribbean in 1780s. And he documented quite a lot of the medical practices that the enslaved Africans would have delivered, and how dependent the plantations were on them. So quite a lot has been done. It was a useful presentation, there's no doubt about it. But it's not that we are totally ignorant about these things in the Caribbean. As David Commission pointed out, we are not that backward at all as presumed from a number of quarters. We have made quite a lot of advancements and progress since emancipation. And that's one of the areas as well. We know what we brought, we know what we contributed to this region. And if you add the foods and all those things, you come up with a really big package. Huh? But how do you factor that into reparations? This is a challenge, and perhaps, you younger minds might have some ideas to contribute. So over to you.
Yeah, I would first like to say that that presentation was fascinating. Not so much because all the information was new, but because he brought such a wealth of information into one presentation. We've had scholars come through the Caribbean before to speak at Emancipation, who've spoken about the music, about dance. We've had them come and speak about stories. We've had them come and speak about technology. But no one has weaved together all those dots into one narrative. Even so, he also brought new information to me. That was the fact that the tango, itself is a Central African word. That is quite extraordinary.
No, he said Congo, from the Congo.
Yeah, Congolese word. Tango itself is, the dance itself is it's hard for people in Argentina and so on to believe that this dance is not something that comes to them from Europe. But it would be quite extraordinary. The next time I have a conversation with some Argentinians, to actually put forward to them the fact that the word itself is an African word.
They might find it even more difficult because remember they have wiped out almost every black man in Argentina. So when you tell them Congolese brother, they'll want to know where are these Congolese. they killed almost every one of them. Huh?
Just for the information, though, you have very strong movements for African rights in Uruguay and Argentina, which are said to be countries without Africans. They just happen to be lighter skinned Africans. Some of us would not recognize them as Africans right off the bat. But there's a strong movement, Pan-African movement in Argentina and in Uruguay, down the southern southern cone of South America. So that's something for us to always be aware of. So yeah, I think that was quite a fascinating conversation, and I hope the young people who are studying these things are listening. I also want to that discussion that David introduced. I think there was a nuance missing in the conversation. So David was correct in the sense that Caribbean luminaries, intellectuals, academics like yourself, Dr. Fergus, and so on, who fall into those categories. You guys have done the work to uncover the past and so on. But y'all have not done the work to translate that into the textbooks. That has not arrived yet. in the textbooks to a large extent of of primary and secondary school children across the Caribbean. So the vast majority of Caribbean people are not exposed to the latest research and writing and
I don't think
understanding.
that was the point he was making, Kaffer. I think your mom as MC made that point, but he refuted it.
Yeah, I think that both of them were saying things that were true. The Master of Ceremonies was arguing that the Caribbean hasn't done enough to advance the intellectual development, the post colonial intellectual development, the epistemic reality, the cognitive. They haven't done enough to overthrow the cognitive imperialism that the colonials left us with. And David was saying, but we have. And the truth is a mixed bag. At the tertiary level, at the level of our great luminaries, thinkers, and academics, the work has been done. To translate that, the work now to take that work, the efforts of these thinkers and to put it in front of the generations today and tomorrow through the textbooks has not been done. And we know that there are certain groups and individuals who are blocking that from happening. But we also know that there's not enough effort on the part of the academicians to make that a reality. So I think that both of them were correct in the discussion that there's not enough has been done on one level and a lot of work has been done on the other. So it's two different levels they were discussing. It's important for us to understand that both of them had significant points in that regard. But this presentation is actually fascinating. I want to hear what Kwame got from it.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll start with the last point first, and then I'll dovetail into Robin Walker's presentation. Big fan am I of the historian and scholar. But let's speak to the issue of what has been done to address what you would call this intellectual imperialism, as it were. This post-colonial stain on our minds. Yes, there are the monuments, and you wrote a report on that speak to our public spaces and how we decorate our public spaces within Afro-descended, what we'd call them post. I don't want to use the word post. Neo-colonial constructs, majority black neo-colonial constructs, and we decorate them with these aesthetics that pay homage to genocide. It's insane that it still happens. It is a stain on our consciousness. It really hampers our intellectual and spiritual growth, and it is an insult certainly to our ancestors. Again, kudos to you for writing such a sterling report. We look forward to do a much deeper dive in terms of its content. Hopefully, when we come out of our break, come out of our little sabbatical, we can shine even more light on that, because again, sometimes reports are done, sometimes writings are done, especially the tertiary level, sometimes publications and papers are done, but it doesn't trickle down to the masses. There isn't an opportunity for a lot of that material, for a lot of that scholarship to make its way to the coffee tables and the dinner tables and the discourse of our people. And it's because of the fact that outside of your Indaba Radio program, for instance, and thank you to those who are tuning in from Africa and the Caribbean and the US and elsewhere. We see you, we hear you, we'll come to your comments in a little while. But it's so important for us to take this work, a lot of it that is buried in publications and papers, that after they are marked, after the PhD is awarded, after the certificate and the robes are done and the hats are donned, it dies. It dies a natural death because we don't have the media outlets supporting this. We don't have the publishers, often not owned by us, supporting this kind of material. And certainly at the lower levels of the pedagogical process, your kindergarten level, your primary level, your secondary school level, it certainly doesn't enter that discourse. Far removed for it to enter into, again, that public discourse, that public space, that bantering back and forth as you're having your tea and biscuits,
Yeah.
hopefully Accra and your Morbi instead. So it's really not there, and we need to see it there. So I think both of them are making valid points. People are writing, and indeed there is literature there, but you have to dig too far and too deeply, and we need to unearth it. And again, kudos to spaces like Indaba that try to do a brilliant job of that. But when you have 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, if we get away with it by way of our producer, if you have to compare 1 hour and a half once per week, a Rastafari would say strong, to 365 days a year, 24/7 of garbage. And then we have to take little breaks here and there in between. It's just not enough to create critical mass. To speak to Robin Walker and his contribution, it's not the first time that I heard it, because, as I said, I'm a fan, I'm a student of a lot of his work. And the connecting of those dots that speak to the IP, the intellectual property, and what is owed. As an entrepreneur myself, when you put time and talent and treasure into creating new content, new material, you want to be paid for that. And so it's not just unskilled labor and multiplying it times what minimum wage would have been, and these other types of calculations. But yes, you have to bring in the intellectual property discussion, again, from a metallurgy perspective, from a dance perspective, from a music perspective. It shouldn't really surprise us, should it? Because since, and I make the point all the time, the first persons in what we call Hindu Kush were Africans. They were Kushites, really. And the first Chinese were also Africans. We were the first. We are, according to Dr. Clyde Winters, we are the aboriginal people of every culture. Where am I going with this? Well, since we left these places, very much have not been done in terms of creating new genres of dance and new genres of song. So when you hear about and learn about the pentatonic scale, that type of pentatonic scale that you see appearing in the Chinese culture, that's what we gave them. Millennia after, they are still using those pentatonic scales in the exact pattern sequence that we left. Since then, from rap to hip hop to calypso to reggae to Afrobeats to Afrofusion. My daughter would throw me under the bus if I didn't mention the South African amapiano. We invent things as if it's, you know, just coming out of our pores, just coming out of every orifice. So the creative intellect of the African is certainly something that is seen and known and celebrated worldwide in sport, in the NFL, the moves in basketball, etc. We are inventive people. But when you don't get the shine, to use his word, when you don't get the compensation, when you don't get the recognition, and when you remain a permanent underclass, notwithstanding your contribution to humanity, it is saddening, it is vexing to the spirit, and it certainly does a lot to stymie the growth and the potential of an entire people.
Indeed, indeed. And Dr. Fergus, we do have an example in your own book, don't we? Your book, Revolutionary Emancipation, you have discovered the smoking gun. You went into the archives and was able to demonstrate the role that Haiti played both in the abolition of the slave trade and in emancipation, ultimately.
I thought you were going to say the role of Anansi. In fact, I was surprised he did not mention Anansi and its evolution, or we can say, you know, it's siphoning of the idea by Hollywood into Spider-Man, because I think that one is acknowledged that the original idea for Spider-Man was in fact the Anansi stories that the Akan people brought across the Americas. Anansi is across the Americas, right? And of course, Anansi was very feared by the planter class. The Maroons themselves said that it is Anansi that taught them the skill of camouflage and warfare and guerrilla warfare and so on. So they believed in Anansi. Anansi wasn't a spider or a story for them. Anansi was a god of wisdom. just as he's recognized even today in Ghana. Another area that I think some people might find a stretch of the imagination, but it's real, Pentecostalism. I think, Kwame, you might understand that. The way that white people worship today, right, is a form of worship that they condemn as primitive, from Africans, this lively, jovial way of worshiping, right? So the whole Pentecostal movement is derived from African way of worshiping, and then whether you, you can make a claim. You see, my concern is not worry, but concern as a reparationist is how do you translate that into the narrative and not just say, okay, I'm presenting this on a reparations forum, but how do you translate the ideas into a reparatory narrative in terms of claims, right? So he has laid the framework down. I mean, the sort of intellectual introduction to it, but we also need to interrogate a lot more. How do we engage those ideas into? I have a problem with my battery. How do you engage with my okay, let me hand over there. I got a problem with my computer which might switch off.
Until you come back, Dr. Phil, we will continue
Let's
this.
check my power here.
We'll continue discussion until you have that resolved.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Dr. Fergus is looking at how to put all those things into a framework that could be useful for the reparatory justice movement, and that is important. I mean, I also thought it was quite fascinating, the whole conversation on Brer Rabbit, Uncle Remus, Peter Rabbit and Bugs Bunny. That connection is something that I myself had not heard of before. So it's very, very interesting. And these things, of course, are things we'd want to look at more closely. But yes, I think that I think we could develop some vocabulary here to use for the discussion. And part of it, one of the words I want to introduce us to is popular memory. I think that we have to distinguish between history, what people like academics like Dr. Fergus produce, and the historical narratives that are popular in the country, in the society, in any society, the ones that give meaning and substance and identity to people, that give them a sense of who they are as a people, and what their values are. And I think that going back to that conversation that the moderator had with Dr.
That's where you bridge the gap, Shabaka. You guys are the bridges between the two.
Yes,
I would call you, the first-rate professional activist.
Yeah, but where, and this comes back to a discussion, a kind of a debate that Kwame and I have around the question of homeschooling versus putting our emphasis on creating our own institutions and removing our kids from the formal system, as opposed to doing the work to transform the formal system into something that would benefit everybody in the society, including our children. And I think that, and so we do have some, and I think both things are valuable, but I think that it's important for us not to lose sight of the fact that in a post-independent society, we are in charge now.
Neo-colonial.
Post-colonial society, rife with coloniality. In a society of that nature, we still are in a position now. We still have independence has given us the opportunity now to build in a new level of freedom, a new level of our people, and we have to take that responsibility very seriously to move the ideas that the first 2 or 3 generations of Caribbean scholars have laid down into the classrooms of our children. The way that they have deconstructed the colonial narratives and helped us to understand our past. We now have to have the courage to take that material and put it in front of our children, the will and of course the will and moral character to do it with our eyes on the future, to create a better future for our society. So that's really important. It's important for us to understand those dimensions.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. Go ahead, Dr. Fergus, finish.
I was going to say that sometimes, again, we have to look at the textbook materials that we have out there. When I was in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago, one of the panelists brought up a discussion on the Cape book that addresses reparations. You know, reparations is now a subject of the Cape syllabus. And that book was written by Vereen Shepherd and a colleague from, I think, the same CARICOM Center for Research. I really blame myself that I had never taken a look at the book. I talked about the book from time to time, that reparations, was a sort of a success in that regard, partial success, that the struggle had been able to get the subject matter into the schools, even if at the sixth form, we know it can't stay there. But I had never seen the book. I even spoke with my publisher, about the book, and
what is the verdict on this book?
The remedy was, let me go and buy the book. So immediately I bought the book, and so I had a read of it, and it's very extensive. I think we need to look at it. It definitely is not at the level of the lower secondary school. So it means more work has to be done. The same book, I doubt, can be used at that level. So we have to continue to produce books on reparations and reparatory justice to take to the other levels of the secondary school and into the primary schools as well. So I
would say that Dr. Vereen Shepherd, I spoke with her about a year ago when we both met at a conference together. And she did indicate that she wanted to come and launch that book here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I did put her in touch with our chairman, and that was supposed to be arranged. So we look forward to that still happening. That's something that should still be in the cards, that we do have Dr. Vereen Shepherd here to launch that book in Trinidad and Tobago, and that we in this community become the facilitator of getting that book into the hands of our people. If you say, Dr. Fergus, and I trust, based on who Dr. Vereen Shepherd is and the work that she's done, that book it has merit.
It does. I looked at it from cover to cover, although it was a quick read, but I was satisfied that it covered a tremendous amount of the issues. Yeah. But there's more to be done, as I said, not only at the sixth form level, but to translate that same topic into a lower form usable text. School text. It mustn't just be a teacher's source, and this is part of the problem with writing for schools, that they become teacher's sources. They need to be school text, students' textbooks that they can take home and read and use for assignments and so on.
So there's work that needs to be done. But Doctor, let me just clarify for our listeners. You are the chair now of the Reparations Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. So how are you going to translate your critique of the reparatory justice movement into the work that you intend to do moving forward? I think that is the $1 million question on tonight's program.
No, I can answer the question. I mean, I will answer more from a personal level, because even before I got the book, I had contemplated writing a textbook for secondary schools on reparations. But I now that I'm the chair of the committee, I think it could be a committee project. So yes, the question is put in it that this must be done. It has to be done, and we cannot wait on others to do it. We cannot keep saying that something is missing in the school system, something is to be done, and wait on other people to do it, which is one of the problems that we have. And what happens? Sometimes when the book is written, it is written by somebody outside of our interest group, And then we start complaining that it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that, that they misinterpreted this thing and so on. But we left it up to them. We created a vacuum for somebody else to engage, to exploit, like the Chinese. Not that the Chinese would write the book, but that kind of vacuum that the Chinese, just make bigger and bigger and bigger and make a fortune out of it. We have
No,
to do
absolutely.
that. We can't leave it
Absolutely.
for other people to do. We can't.
Sure. I agree with you 100%. And I want to say perhaps a couple of things here. One, last with Chinese, it's ironic that we have not done enough, even within living memory. Again, this popular memory that our brother is talking about, to safeguard and to secure and to protect some of our current intellectual property. Well, I wouldn't say forget about the past, but in addition to the past, the patent for the steel pan and the registration of it, that is not under the control currently of Trinidad and Tobago. So, notwithstanding, it's the only significant instrument invented in the 20th century by Africans, taking the discarded oil drum and making it into not just one instrument but an entire orchestra of instruments. We were not first to the patent office with regards to that invention of our own, and there are a number of other genres and aspects of music that, again, we are so inventive. I think we take a lot that we do for granted, and then when we see another person or group or culture or again doing certain things, again filling the void of the vacuum, then we hold our head and we bawl and we complain, to use that local parlance, hold your head and bawl. But we need to do more in terms of securing and protecting our intellectual property. So that is something that we can do as part of reparatory justice moving forward, ensuring that when individuals have inventions, have made certain contributions, whether they themselves can afford to patent it, can afford to do the copywriting or not, that there is a channel, a conduit through which these things can be recorded, so that again, kudos can be given, and more than kudos, finance and benefit can be given to the original inventor. To the point that you made concerning the Pentecostal movement, it is quite certain that the African influence, the song, the dance, the moves, the giving away to the spirit, the glossolalia, very technical term, speaking in tongues, and these kinds of things, they were shunned. They were called bad. They were called evil. They were called demonic, until they recognize and realize a certain segment of that Christian demographic, that this thing is catching on, and this has a kind of a mass appeal, and there's some significance to this. So let us work with this. Let us use this to our advantage. Certainly within the spiritual Baptist community, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the more authentic version of it. We see that happening all the time. Again, the giving away to the Spirit, and that more charismatic approach to spirituality, to worship, again, with all the gifts, or what we call the charisma gifts,
And faith healing. Faith
showing up.
healing
It's
is
really
also an African introduction to the Americas, to
definitely,
Western civilization. Faith healing,
definitely the
which
faith
is
healing
such a
aspect.
big marketable thing now, right? But this
Definitely,
was frowned
definitely.
upon at the time as ugly and all kinds of things, right? Faith healing, yes.
Oh, sure. Faith healing is part of there are 12 charisma gifts, and that is one of them, to be sure. And so what we are seeing is a repackaging and a rebranding of African artifacts, African culture, African tradition. When we are looking at, and I want to land on it, at least for now, how do we now, as part of the reparations discourse, right the wrong. I think it's very laudable what you want to do in terms of creating at least maybe a committee project to write such a book. But I would not want to see it lost, and I'm saying lost, air quotes, lost only within a historical contextual framework. Why? Not every African child is going to go on to study history. And so we outside of history, it needs to be part and parcel of something as compulsory as social studies as early as the primary level. And to speak to what you were talking about earlier, Shabaka, yes, there's a space for both the homeschool and the unschooled and the private school, and yes, the public school. And we definitely want to convert and to teach and to modify and to train and to advance all of those spaces so that we can be operating on equal footing. But we are far from that. And so as a result of that, there is a certain kind of mixed approach that I see happening now, and I myself participate in it. So while my children are brilliant and they know Swahili, and my daughter is studying Zulu and Xhosa and all kinds of things, the reality is that there are people within our public school setting that does not have that advantage. So what do? We make ourselves available for things like reading and for demonstrations and for visitations and working with summer camps and working in other environments where there is a wider cross section of our people. But for persons like me, sending them to the wolves and sending them to the system to be educated is not certainly something that we are willing to do. Never mind, we anticipate and recognize that there's a responsibility that we have to fix that. And through the work that you're doing and through the work that we are doing here and that I do when I go to the schools as part of the PTA and as part of the visits and as part of what we do after school, during school hours, etc., we can bring a lot of that to bear in terms of changing minds and changing hearts.
Yes, so we have a message from our producer to wrap up. So let me make my final statement, then I would give way to Shabaka and Kwame. You would check the comments and give your greetings to these people who have been so faithful with us. Um, just one point I want to make, and that is that yes, you're correct with respect to the going beyond history when we are dealing with the schools and reparations topic, because I mean we have to be truthful. Very few students do history at the lower forms, and just a tiny fraction of that go into the sixth form to do history. So it means even though reparations is now on the syllabus, it's just a tiny fraction of the school population that is impacted by that knowledge or try to get some kind of consciousness about reparations. So it's something that really must be addressed, something must be done, and it seems to be a sort of urgency. This is our last edition of Indaba for a short while, as Kwame would have said earlier. We are taking a break until after Emancipation Day. So, to our listeners, we have had a great season with you, and we will be back. We will be back, and we will let you know exactly when that would be. But we are going to take a break, and I would say a well-deserved break. So to my co-host, I say, well, we keep in touch. So I can't say see you after emancipation. But, we're in touch, planning and moving forward. We hope one of the things we would like to see, and we have started discussing it, is how we can get the voices of these people who are online to be heard as well. So we are working on that and see if we can work around the technology where you can send us 30-second clips, on a question, with a question or comment, or concern. We are working on that. So the next time we are back, we hope to be much more interactive with you. Over to Shabaka.
Yeah, let me say that, and then on a good note, I have gotten images of our group of drummers, the Wassa Foley drummers, performing in Caracas, Venezuela, to massive crowds. Apparently, they have been very well received in Venezuela. People love the group. Myself working with Khadija and Rennie and the embassy here in Trinidad and Tobago, we were able to facilitate that trip. And so I'm very happy to be able to report that, I don't think Wasafoli's ever performed to the kind of audiences they have in Veni here in Trinidad and Tobago. The culture is being very well received down there. And of course, when they come back, we hope to interview Xavier or one of the other members here on Indaba to find out about that experience. So that's something we look forward to. In terms of tonight's show, let me just say that it's not just the history that creates the popular memory. Popular memory is something that is deeply concerning to me now. How do we, it's the narratives that exist in the society that are propped up by the people that we celebrate in our public spaces, by national holidays, and so these things all come with narratives built in. And of course, those narratives, to a large extent, even despite the work of the Dr. Ferguses, the Hilary Beckles, the previous generation, Walter Rodney's, Norman Gervans, and so on, despite all the work that they have done, Eric Williams, even the work, even in his own work, has not filtered down into to contest. They haven't really come to fully contest or overthrow the narratives that we inherited from the colonial period, which are, of course, preoccupied with or related to inside of part of the whole the project of subjugation. And of course, we are the people who are we are the subject of the subject. We are the subjugated in that conversation. So these narratives were meant to be part of a process of subjugating us. And those are the narratives that create the popular memory, which is quite distinct from the information that we have available to us in academia. So historians like Dr. Fergus would think completely differently to the average person on the street who is not being influenced by the research that has been done by our great luminaries, but by the narratives that are still alive inside of the information that makes up the popular memory of the society. And so one of the challenges of the reparatory justice movement would be to begin to contest some of those popular narratives and to overthrow them in such a way to move the discussion forward so that the masses of the people can really get on board with this particular movement, which Dr. Hilary Beckles has already predicted will be the greatest political movement of the 21st century.
Yes, I agree with you. In fact, that trickle down is exactly what I mentioned at the last panel. And I wanted to tell Gabri he's in the Africa Report. I don't know if you saw him, but yes, he's in the Africa.
I didn't see him.
He's at the village. He's at the village. Yeah, you missed that one.
Okay. I missed that.
Okay. Over to you, Kwame.
Well, thank you so much. Let me recognize all of the comments, and certainly I'll be more than happy to do a closing. So I'm starting tonight off with Mr. Kevin Robinson, aka the Dan Man, out of Jamaica, sending his greetings, of course, to the Indaba crew. Out of Connecticut, we have Deborah E. Walters as well, doing the same to the Indaba family. We have our Judah embassy in Honduras. These are African Ethiopian Hebrew Israelites in Honduras, by the way, a royal grouping there, and we're just so very happy to have them. Dr. Clive Banks et al. Royal greetings from the Kingdom of Judah in America. We also have a human rights defender, an activist par excellence, author, and just a warrior scholar in Cecile Johnson, chiming in on tonight. Very, very concerned about all of the theft, very, very concerned about the copying of the African fabric, making mention of the fact that we need to take them to the World Court and file a complaint against them, of course, in her typical a warrior mood fashion, human rights defender fashion. We would not expect anything less. We cannot lose this technology. She is making the point. Of course, out of St. Lucia, we have Bongo Wisely Tofari, big up and I, out of St. Lucia, the chair of the Caribbean Rastafari organization and member as well of CPAN, Caribbean Pan-African Network. And of course, he's bringing greetings, but beyond bringing greetings, he made mention of the fact a little lower down in his comments that Mr. Walker is so right. The decolonizers didn't see us, well, decolonizers, not the decolonizers using local parlance, didn't see us as human. Hence, the lack of respect for our intellectual property, or IP, as mentioned by myself and you here on the platform. CRC, as in the Caribbean Reparations Commission, must factor these in our quest for reparatory justice. So we are thankful for that comment. We also have out of the Bahamas, Prophet the Honorable Ras Jamiki, I call him the Mayor of Bahamas, chiming in and giving, of course, respect where respect is due on the program. There's a young ambassador, youth ambassador out of Sierra Leone also chiming in on tonight. Ibrahim Kamara, friend and colleague of mine. Greetings from Sierra Leone. Is engaged, of course, right here in Trinidad and Tobago, not to be left out of the Truthversation. We have Sister Irene bringing greetings from the Trini Posse. And we have, again, Bahamas making the point. I agree, I wanted to write a book for young students, like grades 1 to 3, that can use it. And yes, about reparations and what it is and why we should be concerned. So very, very powerful engagement by all with respect to our discussion on tonight, starting with textile imperialism, and what a wonderful way to end this series, this season, with regards to dealing with imperialism in a way that few really think about and look at. But it's quite essential, again, to this whole issue of the popular memory, that you have things that are authentic versus your carbon copy, your bootleg, so to speak. And you want to have the original, you want to support the original, but sometimes they come so good that it's very difficult for you to discern. But we learned some techniques. You said it has both inside and out. There's no wrong side when it's done right. So both sides have the same color. It does not wash out when it's done the African ancient traditional way. And certainly when you buy by way of the locals, you get to support very ancient industry as well. Again, kudos to you for that fantastic report. Further to that,
let's close up there, Kwame. Let's close up because it's
well,
almost time.
I'm definitely going to try and land now. So with regards to all of those of you who came in and you chided in, again, Sister Yanine out of the US, Gary, Indiana, actually, to be specific, we recognize all of you. But yet again, even in dealing with the reparations issue, the one program that can bring you these kinds of hard-hitting topics, we have a challenge ourselves in being limited in time. And if we have to impact upon that popular memory, we are going to have radio stations dedicated to this kind of content. And in that regard, in my closing comment, I want to say kudos to the work that Kwame Ture Education and Development Center is doing in their bid to have an African, a Pan-African and Afrocentric radio station. We have none in Trinidad and Tobago. And if they can land that victory, I think that would go a really, really long way in terms of righting a lot of wrongs with regards to the whole issue of the popular memory. Well, we are out of time, but we're not out of love, we're not out of faith, we're not out of words. On behalf, of course, of Dr. Claudius Fergus, our activist, scholar, extraordinaire historian, and on behalf of our young, dynamic, very vibrant, very, 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 very effervescent personality in Brother Shabaka Kambon, again, warrior activist extraordinaire. And yes, I myself, His Excellency Ambassador Reverend Kwame Kamau, on behalf, of course, of our Queen sister, working very hard behind the scenes, Renee Francois, very well-deserved rest is coming up for you. And yes, to our producer, Queen Mother Zakia Uzuma Wadada, we want to thank you for your support and your backing. Without you, this couldn't be made possible. And yes, thank you to the audience. Those are on 91.1 FM, those by way of YouTube, and yes, those by way of Facebook. We thank you, we love you, we see you. And until the next edition, again, love and light to each and every one of you. And we'll be looking out the windows for you when we return. Same time, same place, same channel. Until then, goodbye for now.
Goodbye.